Welcome to Mystifying Miracles. Today is quite the story. If you've never heard Kayla Gabbard's testimony of healing and deliverance, man, you have to. That's what I'm going to be going over today. So stay tuned. We'll get into it. Before I dive into Kayla's testimony, I do want to stress that there are a lot of details. A lot of things happened in her life throughout her illnesses and whatnot. So I didn't get all the details in this story. I tried to pick out some main points. I do highly recommend you go to her ministry, social medias. I'll link them in the description because you will be blessed. It was 2011 when Kayla Gabbard's health journey began. Throughout time, she would eventually be diagnosed with AVCS, which is an abdominal vascular compression syndrome. Also, she'd be diagnosed with lupus, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, EDS, which is Ehlers-Danlos, and more. This is going to be amazing. As I said in the beginning, guys, it's her testimony, her story of deliverance and healing in Jesus' name. So one night in 2011, Kayla and her husband, Walt, had been camping kind of out in the boonies in Canada somewhere, and she awoke and she just began vomiting. But not only that, she'd vomit, then pass out, like over and over. An ambulance had to come out that night and take her to a hospital. Now, because they were in the middle of nowhere, that took 2 hours just to get to one. Once she got there, they told her that, it's just your gallbladder. And they were kind of not nice to her. They just kind of said, well, you should probably go back to your own country, which the U.S., and seek treatment there. Yeah, so not very nice at all. But once they did get home, she says that she didn't have any further problems for a few months. So it was kind of like, like anybody else would do, like, all right, a fluke thing. Maybe I just had a virus or something. That's what I would think. Once she became pregnant with her first son, Kayla started getting very sick again after everything she ate. She'd eat a snack or a meal, vomiting, one after the other, and it was bizarre. It was kind of out of nowhere. She said during this time, she began to be in and out of hospitals. We're talking constant. And each time she'd go back in, they'd tell her it was food poisoning. She'd come back home after she got a little bit better, and then it would happen again. And this was a cycle of just being told food poisoning. So this was leading up to 2012 and beginnings of 2012. So it was a very trying time. After the birth of her first son, she finally did set up a time to have the gallbladder removed because that's what they told her in the beginning. But despite that, her problems still never went away. But, you got to think, somebody this sick and you're not knowing why, Kayla was still hopeful during all this. Over time, a few years spread out, Kayla would eventually be seeing 11 different gastro doctors. In 2015, when her family moved to Kentucky, that's when her pancreas started acting up and giving her issues. And over time, she ended up having 3 more surgeries due to this. Now, once 2019 came around, Kayla says that was the worst year of her life, of her family's life. It was horrific. It was just full of so much darkness, she says. And her husband had so much faith in the doctors. Even though they'd already seen so many of them and in and out of hospitals, they had hope that one doctor's eventually gonna find out what's going on and be able to fix it. So in one of her testimony videos, she talks about that yeah, we put all our faith in these doctors instead of putting it in God and Christ. Well, in 2019, Kayla begins to start losing weight drastically. The pounds just begin falling off. And a new doctor diagnoses her with endometriosis. She ends up having to have a DNC, an ablation. And when she awoke from the procedure, the doctor told her that she wouldn't be able to have any more children. And this was devastating to Kayla because Kayla wanted to have more children. She had two, but her and Walt, they wanted to have like around 3 or 4. So knowing that you cannot build your family when that was your hope and what you really wanted to do was just, it was awful. Well, after this procedure, she also gets very sick because she ends up getting an infection inside. She was put into the hospital for about a week, and during that time, they pumped her full of antibiotics to try to get rid of this infection. During that time, she ends up getting C. diff, which is something you can get when you're on a lot of antibiotics, and it wipes out all the bacteria, the good and the bad. So now a person gets C. diff, which she did, and it's just awful. I mean, if she hadn't lost all the weight she had to lose before this, she got C. diff. Every ounce that she had to give, she was now losing it. Kayla now only weighed 100 pounds, just barely. Soon thereafter, she was transferred to a different hospital. And this is where she finally got a correct diagnosis. And it was the diagnosis of SMAS. During this time, because she was still in and out of hospitals, her and Walt needed help. He was working full time, making sure that they had insurance to be able to pay all these bills. And even at that, the bills were still mounting, even when you have insurance, right? So they had to move up to North Carolina, which is where she's from. Her mother lived there, and her mother was able to help out with the children and just Kayla because she was still in and out all the time of hospitals. Shortly after this point, the hospital ends up giving Kayla a feeding tube. This was last resort, as nothing else had helped. During this time, it was a very dark time for Kayla and her family, and she says that she was basically just waiting around to die. Even though she had the feeding tube, the nourishment just could not get through that compression. So during that time, there was many trips to the ER, and doctors tried new feeding tubes. Well, let's try this one. Okay, let's try this one. But no matter, and that's traumatizing, putting feeding tubes down and things like that, none of them seemed to help. Kayla said in her testimony video, she said straight up, her life in this moment, it was a living hell. She was at her breaking point. And she hit it. Man, I cried when I watched her testimony too during this part. So you guys, again, you have to go see that for all the details, and just no one can tell their, like I said in the beginning, can tell their testimony like the person that it happened to, that it's theirs, But during this dark time, she was at the end of her rope. She would have conversations with her husband, Walt, telling him, to please, I don't want to be here. She wanted him to find a way to end it for her. She just didn't want to carry on anymore in life. And the past 8 years up to that point had been grueling, had been horrific, terrible, just full of sickness and darkness. And she'd had her fill, But in addition to that, she also says that she didn't want to be a burden anymore to Walt or to her family. It's a hard thing when somebody's sick, whether it's chronic illness or, whatever, what have you, a disability. It's hard not to feel like a burden on your loved ones. I can relate to that when I had MS. So I feel for her when she says this in her testimony, and I feel for people that are still going through this today. Thank the Lord. Obviously, that never happened. And it was after this point when her and Walt began to look up this diagnosis of SMAS on the internet. And the more and more research they did, they saw that, it seems a lot of young women are getting this. Well, they kept digging and finding all they could. They come across this doctor, a Dr. Marone. He was based out of Maryland, and it seems that he had helped to heal many young women with this condition. It was about 2 weeks later when her and Walt, they started heading north towards Johns Hopkins where he was, and they had an appointment with him. Now, he informed the both of them this is a risky surgery, and if it is successful, you're going to have a really long road to recovery. Again, Kayla was at her, end of the rope. So she had nothing to lose. There was nobody else that could help her. So she said, let's do it. She ends up having the 10-hour surgery. And when she awoke, she experienced that long road to recovery. You got to think, for so many years, her stomach wasn't used to digesting food because it couldn't. So now, slowly but surely, as she's learning to eat again, your stomach does some weird things, so it has to adjust and get used to it. Once she gained a little bit of strength back, her family was finally able to move back to Kentucky. Now, for several months, they began, her and her family, to visit a bunch of churches. They knew that they needed to get back into it. For so many years, they couldn't because Kayla was so sick. But they wanted to raise their children in church, so they began trying out a bunch. And it was around this time, Kayla says, she began to realize that God saved her for a purpose. She didn't know what that was yet. She just knew that she could have easily died so many times, and she was still here. And she knew that the Lord was telling her that she shouldn't just sit on her hands, so to speak, and do nothing and be idle. So one day at one of the churches, they do an altar call. She goes down to the altar to pray and have a conversation with God. And she asked God, she said, Lord, would you show me what is my purpose? And she heard back immediately. And the word she heard was forgiveness. Before all this, Kayla says she was a type to hold grudges. If somebody did her wrong, well, I'm going to write you off. That was how Kayla was. So when she heard this, she knew immediately what she had to do. And lo and behold, when she gets up from that altar and she turns around, she sees the woman that she needs to forgive. And I didn't include that whole story in this. It's in her testimony, so again, refer to the links that I'll post. But it's an amazing, incredible story. She turns around and she immediately hugs this woman. She forgives her, and they both cry, and it's a great story. So definitely check that out. After this occurred, that altar moment, Kayla begins to realize, wow, I had no idea how real spiritual warfare in this world truly is. So when she got home, she opened up her Bible and she began to read. And she would do this daily. Over time, she says God began to change her from the inside out, just her heart, everything. And, she remained humble through it all. She just had this hunger and a thirst for God. She wanted more. And so she would get her fill all she could by opening up the Word, reading, praying. It was quite amazing. And during all this time, as she's growing in the Lord, she begins to know why. Wow, now I know why the enemy wanted to take me out so much. This makes sense. He had an inkling, like the people she would help, and he tried to take her out time after time. As this time is passing, Kayla says she began to get downloads from God, sermons, if you will. And so she'd open up her journal and jot down these verses that would come to mind, and different key points like teachings and things like that. And eventually she felt the Lord leading her to teach. He said, that's what I need you to do, to teach. Also around this same time, Kayla began purging all these things, clothes, books, all sorts of stuff, trash bags full, taking it out of the house, throwing it away. She said she could no longer keep anything that did not bring goodness to her life. And so at first she says, when I was watching her testimony video, her husband Walt, during this time, he's kind of like, what is she doing? Because he'd see her take out all this stuff from the house. But then he began to see the change in her. Kayla began to do videos here and there. She would put them on social media, and during this time, she was very disciplined of what she needed to do. But you got to also know, too, it's important to say that she was still sick during this time as she's growing in God and taking out all the stuff she no longer wants in her life and whatnot. So she still had the Ehlers-Danlos, the lupus, so many things that she had been diagnosed with. Kayla began to know, all right, I've got to take my health to God. I've been putting all my faith in doctors, which not saying doctors are bad, but she wasn't presenting her health issues to the Lord, really. So she begins to pray for herself, her kids, and Walt, and she's praying fervently. And during this time, Walt, he says drastic change. He didn't even recognize Kayla anymore. And he was just wowed by the change God was doing in her life. So much so that he begins to open up his Bible and start reading it on the daily. So during this time, Kayla's making the little videos, and little by little, her social media is beginning to gain more and more people. People just loved how she could open up the Bible and teach from it. So it just kept growing and growing. Well, one day, Kayla had an appointment, and while she's in the appointment, a couple blocks away, there was a sports card shop. And so while she's in that, Walt says, all right, I'm going to take the boys and we'll check out this card shop on a whim. So he goes in. In the beginning, they're talking about sports, but their conversation with him and the owner, whose name was Jimmy, began leading into deeper things about God, and Walt feels really comfortable with Jimmy. He begins telling everything about his wife, Kayla, and the journey she's been on and what's happened with her health-wise. He leaves the card shop to go pick up Kayla, and as they're going home, he says, oh my gosh, you've got to meet Jimmy. He didn't know why in that moment. He just knew Kayla had to meet Jimmy. Just had to. So for 2 weeks, he's encouraging his wife you got to see him. You got to meet him. He's amazing. And so 2 weeks later, they're finally on their way. He sets it up, a meeting, make sure the owner's going to be there, and he's going to introduce Kayla to Jimmy. And that day she was feeling sick. She wasn't feeling well, so she wasn't really looking forward to it. And she was still kind of like, I don't understand why this has to happen, but okay. Kayla says that they get out of the car. She goes in through the door of that card shop, and she said immediately when she went through, she felt better. Like she didn't feel sick anymore. It was the strangest thing. Well, she meets Jimmy and vice versa. They get to talking, and they're talking, having a good old time, giving their testimonies. And Kayla realizes that God's pushing her to do a revival. Well, Jimmy had a little piece of land. And so as they're talking, like they're just long lost friends, Kayla asks him, well, if I do this revival thing that's been on my mind for some time now, could we use your land? Jimmy says yes. They end up crying, hugging. I mean, that was just amazing to hear that part of the testimony, because that's how it all started, the meet me in the water. So it's just incredible to hear. And then also, it's very important to note that Kayla, she went through deliverance. And through going through deliverance for herself, she knew and understood that that's what she needs to do. Lead others to do the same, to seek deliverance, to bring about healing and revival. And when she went through her deliverance, she was healed. She claims it to this day that in Jesus' name, all those conditions that she had been diagnosed with over the years, gone. And as far as I know, that's still the case. So I claim it too for her, because I think that's just amazing. That's miraculous, guys. It's just beautiful the way God heals when we know what to do, when we know what to bring to him, our health issues, or any issues, that he is faithful to bring that about. We have to believe that. Again, her story is a lot. It's got lots of details, bits and pieces, and there's probably more that I don't even know or haven't heard or seen yet. So again, these are like the main points of what she went through and how her revival and the meet me in the water really began, where it all came from. And I hope it was a blessing to you guys. But please, I so encourage you, check out her page to hear it from her mouth, because you will be blessed. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I hope you have an incredible week. And I am going to see you for the next one.